It's time to break down the biggest stories of the day. This is the top 3 stories of the day on KSLSports.com. 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jacob Band, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Time for the top 3 stories at KSLSports.com. It's all sponsored by Jay Brooks. Jay Brooks, cherish your loved ones with Jay Brooks Jewelers. Explore their expertly crafted engagement rings made from the finest materials. Christmas is 3 weeks from Thursday. Man, go check out Jay Brooks Jewelers. You're looking for excellent options, whether it's an engagement ring, jewelry. They have it. Jay Brooks Jewelers, 2 locations up and down the Wasatch Front. Christian, where are we starting today?
Number 1, the big story, of course, Kalani Watch, Ben, rolling into day 2. How long do you think this is going to go?
I think ideally it would be wrapped up yesterday. If not yesterday, we might as well do it today. I am curious. This feels so much like, with the irony of tomorrow being National Letter of Intent Day, it does feel like these last recruiting battles where you're hoping to get the final visit, and whoever ends up with the final visit feels confident that they're going to be able to ink that person because they can continue to up the bar. You know, they want to have the ball last in overtime so they know exactly how many points they have to score to win. I think that's what you're hoping for. And look, with where BYU is as a football team getting ready for Saturday, I don't think Kalani can be leaving town at this point. You know, he can't be disappearing to go be courted by Penn State for 24 hours, obviously. So whatever other final offer Penn State's going to be able to come back with probably is going to happen over the phone, over Zoom calls. And that doesn't mean they laid out all their cards right away. I'm sure they made an extraordinarily compelling offer. They would have had to pique his interest in the first place beyond it just being Penn State. They had to have a offer that wasn't just competitive, but was truly something that they didn't think BYU would be able to match. And once BYU threw down the gauntlet and said, hey, we're at least going to get this as close as possible or give you the tools to compete at the level we think you need to at BYU with the resources we can offer, it does seem like the winds have swayed back towards BYU's favor, or at least they're in the running once again, which I will tell you honestly, 24 hours ago at this point, I really felt like things were leaning heavily towards Kalani going. We played the press conference between Joey McGuire and Brett Yormark and Kalani yesterday, and Kalani did not address the issue directly. He said, it's a good thing. I'm with Mitch Harper. I don't understand how that would have been a good thing at all that he's getting this type of interest. It does mean BYU's playing well, but this type of distraction is not necessarily a positive for the Cougars. But if that decision hasn't been made yet, I do think that probably means that BYU has at least made this competitive. And if it's competitive, does Kalani just lean with where he's comfortable, with what he knows, with what his love is for BYU and decide to stay?
It's kind of a double-edged sword because the longer this drags out, I feel like is better for BYU in the sense of keeping Kalani Sitake. But at the same time,
why?
Because I think that is going to give them more time. As we heard yesterday, like even going throughout our show, it felt like Kalani was going to leave. And then by the end of the night, it felt like Kalani had met with, and it's all rumored, but met with members and boosters. And it seemed like BYU got all the financial resources together. So I think more time gives them, I guess, more time to do that, right? But at the same time, it's a distraction when you have this bowl game coming up.
I think if he's going to stay at BYU, he needs to put a pin in it today. In all honesty, I think
ideally, yeah.
If this is the plan and he's going to be here and BYU has lined up what their best offer is, because what's BYU not putting on the plate at this point? Are you going to hold off and say, well, let's go in for a second final visit and try and offer something on Thursday just in case? Like I can't imagine that would be the ideal approach to maintaining him or keeping him here in Provo. I think you had to lay out everything you could. You had to, circle the wagons yesterday to put the best offer available and understand that it was going to be countered by Penn State still one more time. And maybe Penn State can't offer anymore. I think if this drags on beyond today, it starts to get worse for BYU. I think if he doesn't say, look, I'm here, we're competing for a conference championship on Saturday. If we win, we're going to the college football playoff. This is exactly where I want to be. I know what type of money you're offering me. I think if this drags on beyond today, I would think that he's still very seriously considering Penn State, and I don't want that. If I'm a BYU fan, I don't want that. And it's been extraordinarily impressive what's happened over the last 24 hours and their ability to get these huge donors from these major companies located in our state to step forward, make public pleas. Obviously, there's way more happening even behind the scenes, upping his money, seemingly at a moment's notice to make sure he can stick around. I do get the feeling, and I've done this before, and this is This is a bit of a flawed comparison because I think Kalani's an absolutely excellent head coach. But have you ever bid for something on eBay?
Yeah, I love eBay.
And you kind of get to that final 6 hours where it's counting down and you're like, ooh, if you had told me I was going to pay this amount for this product in the first place, I probably never would have put that initial bid down on it. Maybe you start at $25 and by the end you're at $100 and you're thinking, oh man, I would have just bought this for $90, but I never would have spent $100 on this product. I do wonder if we're getting into this arms race between Penn State and BYU where they're upping themselves to a cost that I'm not sure to what end it brings. Is BYU putting Kalani actually into a spot now to compete for a championship that they weren't a week ago? And if they weren't a week ago, why not? And what changes dramatically? Like, why weren't, if they were all in on Kalani a week ago, did they need, or were they not? And did they need Penn State to come in and say that, like, we think he's good enough, and then BYU opens their eyes and says, like, oh, yeah, we do think he's good enough, actually. We didn't see it until somebody else placed a bid on the product. Now I realize how much I actually love it. Like, I'm not sure I understand that aspect of this conversation of why everybody is willing to continue to increase the price over and over and over if you weren't willing to do it a week ago.
I think that honestly ties into what Kalani was talking about when he said that this is a good thing because he is getting more and more national attention. And yes, that hurts BYU's pocketbooks, but that ultimately is a good thing for the program, for Kalani, and for his staff, right?
To get this type of commitment.
To get this type of commitment and this type of money that, frankly, they deserve. And it's been well known that BYU has not paid their coaches historically, right?
As well
as what they deserve. And now you have a team that's 11-1 and on the verge of the college football playoff, and a lot of people would argue that they should be in. And there are a lot of guesses out there as to what Kalani Sitake makes. Nobody knows for sure.
Yeah.
But if those numbers are true, he is severely underpaid.
Yeah.
And I think that he has every right to be one of, if not the highest paid coach in the Big 12.
He certainly deserves to be in that conversation. And if BYU wants to keep him from Penn State, he's going to have to be. And then my further question, we talked to Mitch about it in the last segment, is what happens next year when somebody comes calling? If BYU continues to win at the level that this expectation sets, which is 10 wins a year, 11 wins a year, he's recruiting kids from all over the country, he's getting big recruits to come to BYU and having success at a school that has, in the last 30 years, not had this level of success, it's not going to stop. And at what cost are these donors, the BYU fan base, willing to get to keep him around? Because if he's going to be the hot commodity every summer, and Penn State has already laid this out, are they going to keep being able to fend people off? Or is this going to be Kalani's last time to play this card and have to say, hey, all the donors came to your backing. They've given you everything you need to compete in the Big 12. BYU's not leaving the Big 12 anytime soon. You don't need an Ohio State-like budget or an Oregon State or an Oregon budget to compete in the Big 12. You just don't. You know, Texas Tech has a lot, but we can give you as much as Texas Tech. Now it's on you to win. Is that enough? Is that expectation enough? And then at some point, does that get tapped out because these other schools continue to come for him? We'll see. Kalani's going to have to keep winning on the field. As long as he wins on the field, that is good for BYU. All right, what's next?
Number 2, you talked about it yesterday. After a rough game on Sunday, the Jazz really bounced back last night against Houston.
Very impressive win for the Jazz, 133-125. After getting blown off the floor on Sunday, they just did not belong on the court with the Rockets. At least didn't look like it. And then last night they showed that they can compete with these types of teams. And I think this was the best win of the season for the Jazz. You know, they beat Phoenix early in the year before Phoenix had kind of figured itself out. They beat Boston on the road. And Boston's fine, but it's not a great team. This win, after what they showed on Sunday, I thought was really impressive. And you got it from your 2 stars. And your 2 stars had basically been entirely taken out of the game on Sunday. Markkanen was fine. He had 18 points Sunday afternoon. But it was pretty quiet. It was pretty unimpactful. And they were down 30 most of the game. Keontae George had his worst game as a pro on Sunday. 0 points, 8 turnovers. I think he had 2 assists in the game. Real carelessness at some points in the game. He had checked out mentally, which he had not done at any point this year, which I thought could have been a point in which he regressed for the rest of the year. And it was going to test kind of this new mental strength that he had developed in the offseason and had talked about, and the maturity that I've talked to people in the Jazz front office that they're raving about what a different person he is. And he showed it yesterday. He came out and he had 28 points and he took on the challenge, and he had another bad first quarter. And I thought, oof, is this going to bleed over? Is this going to be something that derails him? Because you've seen this happen with young players. You've seen this happen with young teams. things go wrong, and once it goes wrong, they don't know how to stop it, and Keontae immediately put a stop to it. And I thought that's what was most impressive.
It's a very encouraging sign, obviously, because, I mean, you had been saying towards the latter part of the offseason with some of the conversations that you had, this Jazz front office was very excited about Keontae George, and that kind of caught you and, a lot of people on social media by surprise because of what we had seen over the first 2 years. It was like, really? That guy is impressing you with his maturity? Like, nobody ever would have thought that, and we are actually seeing it. And as you mentioned, the old Keontae George would have had that bad game and then just slid.
Right? And it would have kept going.
But he bounced back, and you got to give him a ton of credit for doing that. And it's really cool to see him take that big step in year 3, similar to what we've seen other players do.
And beyond it mattering for Keontae George personally, more importantly, if you're a Jazz fan, it matters for the Jazz. You have to have guys who can react to adversity. And he showed an ability to do it. Lowry continues to play at a higher level than he ever has. And look, Lowry hadn't been playing particularly well over his last 5 games. He'd gone from 30 points a game down to 20. He was shooting, I think, 23% from the three-point line. Like, that hot start had basically entirely disappeared. And my question for Lowry has always been, can you be more than a complimentary shooter? Can you do things on the court that help you win when your shots aren't going in? And over the previous 5, I didn't think he'd done a ton. And then last night, he only took 3-point attempts because his three-point shot hasn't been falling. And what do you have to do when that's the case? You have to get baskets the hard way. And he earned 11 trips to the free throw line. He made 9 of them. He did make 2 of his 3-point attempts. He got 8 rebounds. He did the other things that are not as fun and not as easy to do when you're his size to help the Jazz win the game, and he found a way to do it. Now, there are other issues at play here. Houston was on the second night of a back-to-back in Salt Lake City after they steamrolled the Jazz on Sunday, and they came into this game very haphazardly. And I thought Kevin Durant played an absurdly lazy game, despite the fact that he had the 30 points, because he's that good of a player that he can wake up and pour in 30, regardless of the difficulty. He's that good of a player, but he didn't really try that hard to win the game. And I thought that was a flaw. I do think Houston's overall a flawed roster. I think it's going to be exposed in the playoffs. But regardless, that was a good win from the Jazz's top players. And then their young players, Ace Bailey, Walt Clayton, and Kyle Filipowski also played really well. I just continue to be shocked at how good of a player Ace Bailey is from an all-around standpoint. There were flashes at Rutgers as a young player that he was going to be a big-time scorer. We knew he could rebound a little. You didn't see any passing. You saw some really poor defensive effort, especially when he was not on the ball. He really checked out and just kind of stood up and sometimes put his hands on his hips and just kind of looked around and just would get back cut and beat all the time by lesser players. You're just not seeing it. His buy-in to be a great NBA player is there. And as long as he is bought in and he's shown, I don't think, a single second on the court over his first 19 games in the NBA that are 20 games in the NBA that he's not going to be fully bought in. With his talent level, if he continues to be this bought in, I mean, he's going to be the Jazz's best player in the next 24 months, and it's going to be by a lot.
That's coachability, man. That's what that is. That is being willing to listen to the people you need to listen to.
Yeah, understanding what's good for you is good for the team, and what's good for the team is good for you, and that was not obvious at Rutgers all the time. And you recognize it had more to do with the context of the players around him and the situation he had walked into than the person himself. So that's a really good sign. Walt Clayton also had his best game as a pro, the other first-round pick for the Jazz. 8 points, 6 rebounds, or 6 assists, 5 rebounds. Hit a couple of shots. He just looked engaged. He looked the most engaged he had, and in fact got most of the backup minutes at guard in the second half over Isaiah Collier. Isaiah played a little bit, but Walt Clayton still got those minutes, so I thought that was really impressive. From Walt Clayton, Jazz back in action on Thursday against the Brooklyn Nets on the road. That's a chance to get back-to-back wins and 3 wins out of 4, and then they're in New York on Friday night against Jordan Clarkson and the Knicks. What's next?
Number 3, amidst all the chaos in Provo yesterday, sounds like there was a team meeting up on the hill. Our guy Steve Bartle reported that after the meeting, reports say it's business as usual.
Yeah, there were dueling team meetings set for BYU and Utah yesterday, and there was some thought that is Witt going to announce his retirement and Kalani's going to leave for Penn State, and that's why they were gathering. It does sound like that might have been the intention of the meeting at BYU, and we don't know if that was ever the case for Utah. And in fact, in all honesty, with National Letter of Intent Day coming tomorrow, Witt shouldn't leave before tomorrow. Witt shouldn't announce that it's his last game. And you know what? Witt should coach the bowl game. Well, he should see what happens in the college football playoff over the next week. But he should coach the bowl game and then announce what he wants to do, or announce shortly before the bowl game and allow Morgan Scalley to take over the same way he was allowed to take over going into the Fiesta Bowl and be the head coach there, the co-head coach, before taking over officially the next year. I would imagine that would be the same situation for Kyle Whittingham. I'd be surprised if he announced it dramatically before that. And honestly, he may want to see what happens with Kalani at BYU. I mean, he may just want to keep an eye on that. Not that I think that should radically change what his decision-making is going to be, but you might as well play it out a little bit, gather a little bit more information just to make sure you're making the right decision.
I have seen, we'll need to confirm this or not, but I have seen that Whittingham has a deadline actually, which is December 5th, which is Friday.
Okay.
So we may know, well, we should know by the bowl game on what's going to happen.
Should definitely know by the bowl game. Utah should absolutely be willing to kick that can down the road. If he needs another week to decide, he's earned that. If he needs another 2 weeks to decide, he's earned that. There's no reason to put this on Witt. Witt, if Witt sticks around next year, I should say, Utah's in a great spot. And if he doesn't, I think Utah's in a just fine spot. I think Morgan Scalley's more than prepared to be the head coach of this team and move on here. And I don't totally get the impression, and certainly there's always movement, but I don't totally get the impression that Utah's staff is going to get picked clean the longer they wait here in these first couple of weeks of the season. It is Tuesday. That means it's a Jazz Ticket Tuesday. Hit it, Christian.
It's Jazz Ticket Tuesday, and your chance to win tickets is right now.
Call this number now.
Call this number now.
Be caller number 12 at 801-575-ZONE. 801-575-ZONE. And you'll be on your way to Delta Center to see the Utah Jazz.
He fires the three. He hits. Oh, don't do me like that.
This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jazz Ticket Tuesday, caller 12 right now, 801-575-ZONE. That's 801-575-ZONE. Wins a pair of tickets to see the Jazz against the Oklahoma City Thunder coming up this Sunday, December 7th at Delta Center. 801-575-ZONE will be the 12th caller through. All right, we'll be back with more next coming up, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.